When peace like a river attended my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my life thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. 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 It is well. It is well. It is well with my soul. My sin, oh the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well. It is well with my soul.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed worship. We will get to the message in just a moment, but first I have a couple of things I'd love to share with you. First, we have an opportunity for you to get some resources at redeemerschurch.com/care. You can submit a prayer request, you can access mental health resources, or you can find our community resource network there. If you are struggling maybe to get some food or some clothing right now, you can head there, submit a request, and we will do our best to pair you with some support. We also want to ensure that we maintain a spirit of generosity and giving, so you have ways that you can give at your convenience at redeemerschurch.com. You can also text to give, or you can mail in your giving. And now it's time for the message. Thirsty for acceptance, Jesus is the one who could quench your thirst. So let's pray.
Hold up, guys. I got to make a phone call. You guys go ahead without me. I have some work to do.
All right, so we should still pray, I guess.
Okay.
Hey, I'm just checking in.
Thank you for these words that you've given us today. Thank you for when we feel like outsiders or when we are. Oh, yeah.
Good shot. Yeah. Oh, hey, hold up. I got to make a call at work. You can play by yourself or something. Just throw it up. Hey. Hey, how are you doing? Yeah. No, I can make the meeting. Yeah, that's fine.
No, you can't.
I'm working. You need to leave me alone for a bit. Okay, I'll be right there. All right. Yeah. Hey, everyone, it's Pastor Nick. We have been in this series that we started called Resistism. And the whole concept behind it has been, as we look forward to 2021, coming out of this crazy, strange year, we're thinking about the habits and the tides of emotions and dysfunctions that might come out of that we've got to be prepared for. There are fundamental things that the Bible teaches us, practices that we need to have in our lives to be strong and resist the coming tide of dysfunctional habits that we're going to see. One of the things that I was thinking about is it's actually kind of different. Like there were problems and habits that we maybe built during this time, divisions and frustrations. But then there were habits that we've always had that are going to come back when things start to normalize, right? Like when we start getting back to school and back to work and household chores and the busyness of sports and all the things that we are involved in. You know, we had this bad habit where we were busy before this pandemic. And it really comes down to what you could call workaholism. Like that's one of the isms we have to be prepared for as life gets back to normal. Now, you might think of that as just somebody who goes to work and works all the time and is busy and has meeting after meeting and doesn't come home very often. But you know, we all have that in us to some degree. You can be a workaholic at school. You can be a workaholic at your home, keeping the place up. You could be a workaholic at your church that I just serve, right? Like it's actually, it is natural for almost everybody to just stay going and going and going, chasing this elusive worth within that, right? And as we get back to things, we've got to be prepared to confront that. The good news is that God has implemented a practice as old as the Bible that most of us don't put into our lives and is actually meant to give us life. You know, during this pandemic, we have had these slower schedules, maybe not, but at the very least, people have been home together more. Maybe for some, there was an opportunity to focus more on relationships, friendships, family, even though you can't see each other, to be more intentional about talking to people. But there was a pace, at least for a lot of people, that things slowed down. And you know, when this thing is over, God willing, as we want it to be, but we're going to get back to the way of life, right? And workaholism is defined by this. It's feeling compelled to work because of internal pressures. It's having a persistent thought about work even when you're not working. That means you're just constantly thinking about it. And it's working beyond what is reasonably expected of the worker as established by the requirements of your job or those around you or economic need. And despite the potential for negative consequences, for instance, like a broken marriage or a time in which your children do not have your attention or whatever it might be, or being worn out with anxiety or burnout, right? And you know what's happened in this is a lot of things have shifted in the pandemic that were already existing, and I think we're going to have to be very conscious of moving forward. For instance, we were already sucked into our phones. Statistics tell us we were tied to our jobs more and more. We were answering emails at all times of day and night. But how much more has that even been exacerbated because all we had for contact was our phones? We got what's called tethered to it. We've been tethered to it even prior to the pandemic, and even more so, we had to be on our computers. We had to be our phones. You had to be able to reach me at all times of day so I can continue to work. And this wasn't just now digital workplaces, but now all types of workplaces had to have you on Zoom. We have become not at a workplace anymore, but everybody had to become tethered to their devices and to their jobs at home. And that's something that they predict is going to actually continue into the future, is more hybrid remote work. And you know, I thought about that word tethered. And you know, that word tethered actually comes from an idea of a chain on an animal that keeps them from movement. It's an animal being tied by some type of strap to maintain their movement so they can't get very far. But you know, what's funny is that word tethered is actually used for smartphones as well. When you're tethered, it means that you are synced together. That's something that always has connection to you. You know, and when we read about the way humans work in the Bible, they have a tendency to slip back into slavery, which is what we're going to talk about, to slip back into a lifestyle in which they are always burdened. Ecclesiastes 2:22, it says, "What do people get from all of their toil and their anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest." Do you hear that? Even at night, even at home, even at your bed, their minds do not rest. Even with their families, their minds do not rest. Even at dinner, their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. You know, as the author of Ecclesiastes is telling us, is we have that in our nature, that we will work hard, we will toil, and we will have to give it away to somebody, and it will have no meaning, and yet we will stay up all day and night stressed and anxious about it. Again, this isn't just about your workplace. You could be a stay-at-home mom and feel like you have to keep everything perfect and you got to take care of all these things. You could be a person who likes to serve. I call it do-gooderism. You know, you have to do good, and so you just work and work and work. And you fail to enjoy and delight in God, and you are attached everywhere you go, at play with your kids, with your friends, at home, at night, in your bed. It is there. You are tethered. Today, I want us to talk about Sabbath, something that almost nobody practices anymore, and yet is so fundamental, so important to God that it was written into the Ten Commandments. Sabbath is a resistance against the nature of man, the nature of our habits, to work and work, to earn our security, to earn our well-being, to worship other gods and work for them, and enslave ourselves in the process. Sabbath is a resistance to workaholism. See, in the Bible, God calls Israel out of Egypt where they were in slavery. They had worked nonstop, been crushed to the bone. They had worn themselves out. They had lost connection with their God. Like, all these things happened because they were in slavery. And God warns them, even though I'm freeing you, Egypt is still in you. And you're going to want to keep working for these other gods. Keep working in a way that disconnects you from me, and never rest in your Creator who has saved you. Like in Egypt, they were food insecure. They were under the rule and thumb of this other god, these powers around them. You know, workaholism is rooted first and foremost in insecurity. I will not have enough. I will not get enough. I will not be good enough. Our family will not be well enough and healthy enough. Workaholism is rooted in first and foremost in our insecurity, our lack of trust in God. And secondly, it's also rooted in idolatry. It's this idea that if I get this thing, if I can just make it good enough, if I can make enough money, if I can make it nice enough, if I can work hard enough for God, if I can work hard enough for mammon, for wealth, for my future, for my retirement, for my spouse, whatever it might be, then I will have worth, then I will have meaning. It's idolatry. That's what God is warning Israel, that if they allow themselves to fall into this workaholism, they're just giving themselves back into slavery. There was a biblical commentator named Walter Brueggemann, and he says this: Israel will come to think, if they don't practice the Sabbath, Israel will come to think that the goal of their life is to obtain, acquire, and acquire. And in order to acquire, it must compete with its neighbor. The system will turn one's neighbor into a threat and a challenge. What he's saying is, when we get into this habit of acquiring and working and trying to earn, and we fall into workaholism, it turns everybody into a commodity to be used. So our relationships are used and abused, just like in slavery. We use and abuse people for our own ends because we're just working all the time. We use people. We neglect our families. There's a joylessness to it. We earned a lot, but man, I'm losing vitality. And you know what that leads to is spiritual death. Or burnout. When you hit that place where it's like, man, I actually am not getting any comfort from my God. I don't spend any time from Him. I barely make it to church. We got sports, we got schedules, we got busyness, work for something. Sabbath is a resistance to all of that. It's a resistance to burnout. It's a resistance to the abuse of other people and making them a commodity. It's a resistance to spiritual death. So we're going to talk about why Sabbath is a resistance against workaholism and all of this. So Sabbath is about a set-apart day to rest and delight in God. That's what Sabbath is. And so, we're out here in this beautiful scenery, and I'm going to tell you why, because there is something about taking time away, stepping out, and just enjoying the creation of God. So when I was in the office, I was talking about how workaholism, what it does is it actually takes away our joy. It enslaves us, or causes us to use or abuse people or neglect people in our lives. And ultimately, we just don't have delight in God. We begin to be more and more separated from who we are in Christ and our own spirits, our own minds, and our connection to the one who created us, right? Well, Sabbath is the resistance against that. It's a set apart day to just be with God, to delight in Him, to be with people and love His creation and to find joy and to be rejuvenated in that joy. And God made it for us so importantly that He put it into the Ten Commandments for His people when He freed them from Egypt. I want to read something that it says, because one of our first points is I want to talk about how Sabbath resists workaholism and all these things I mentioned. First of all, Sabbath resists our joylessness through rest. I like to call it delight. You know, Sabbath resists being joyless. And so many of us, if you just going and going and going, you understand that like things might be working, but you actually start feeling no joy. And here's one of the things that God said to His people. This is right around the Ten Commandments in Exodus. He just delivered all of His people out of Egypt. And here's what He says to them. He commands them, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it set apart, by making it special and holy. He says, 6 days you're going to work and labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath day to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor any of those around you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that's in them, but God Himself rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day. He blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. You know what this tells us about God? Is that even He, when He worked, He stopped to enjoy and delight in His creation. The Sabbath day, what it does is it puts a stop. After 6 days, you can work as hard as you want, but the Sabbath day allows us to stop and look at what God has done in that time, look at what He's created, to go out into nature and see the beauty of what He's created, to delight in His creation, but also to delight in your Creator. It means that I'm going to stop and I'm not going to let work and doing good and serving and making my house beautiful to make my life so focused on this production that I stop to enjoy what God is doing and created, and I don't have this relationship with Him where I'm enjoying Him and delighting in Him. Now here's the second thing that Sabbath does. Sabbath resists enslavement through release. Now here's what I mean. Earlier I talked about when I was in the office that, you know, we had that imagery of like my work and my phone, I'm being tethered to it, right? And I talked about the connection between your cell phone, like everywhere I go now, whether it's at my dinner table with my family on a date, or am I, going to bed, is my email, right? And my connection to work, that anytime somebody can contact me and say, you got to finish this job, or check this, right? I'm tethered to things. Here's something that people don't often realize about this idea of Sabbath embedded into the Ten Commandments. God connected it to their slavery, not just to the creation and His rest, but to the slavery of God's people. Here's what He said in Deuteronomy 5:15. He said, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Now, what does this have to do with their slavery? Because they were put under work over and over again. They couldn't take a break. Pharaoh made them work nonstop until they were weary and dead, until they were struggling and hungry. They were without food. They were just beaten, and their spirits were depressed to the point where they were crying out to God, right? They were enslaved. And He's saying, don't go back into this place where you just work and produce for these other gods, for these other cultures, for your own comeuppance, to a point where you're actually enslaving yourself just like Egypt did, right? And I think we all know that deep down, that at some point, if you've had anxiety attacks, it's like somebody's forcing you to like do this work or to produce, or else you're going to fail, and you are tethered to a place where it's like, I can't get freedom. I don't feel free, right? There's actually this thing about sabbatical years. So not only did God tell people to rest on the seventh day, on the seventh year, they were to take a whole year off and allow their land, their work to produce naturally. But more than that, there was this sabbatical year where all the slaves would be released. Part of the Sabbath is that there's a release of debts, and there was a release of slavery, like you were no longer beholden to slavery, right? There's this connection of freedom. and that you are released. And so when we choose to willfully set apart our week to God, what we're saying is, I'm resisting the ever-calling status of our world and of money and of prestige and of approval to say, you got to do more, you got to do more, you got to do more. And you say, no, I'm resisting that and trusting that God will give me freedom, and I'm entrusting him with my work, that if I set it apart for him, I'm going to find true vitality and true freedom. I'm resisting enslavement through allowing God to release me from that for one day each week, trusting him for it. Now, here's the last one. Sabbath resists spiritual death through our reliance on God. Sabbath resists spiritual death. Now, I'm going to tell you a couple things from Scripture that are a little daunting, all right? The first one is about gathering manna. God told them, you are to collect food 6 days, but on the 7th day, they were starving in the desert, and he says, I'm going to provide for you. You can trust me. You can rely on me, but on the 7th day, you are not to collect more than you need. You are not to work on the 7th day. So collect as much as you need on the 6th, but trust me for the 7th. They were to rely on God, but because of their insecurity, remember, workaholism was rooted in insecurity and rooted in idolatry, believing that they needed to get power from something else and rely on something else other than God. Because of their food insecurity, they still went out and worked. And what happened is their food spoiled, and many actually ate so much in their taking of this that they ended up dying, gorging themselves on it, right? They got diseased from it. He's like, you need to rely on me. And that's what this is God, I trust you that I don't need to work and enslave myself for my own approval, for my family. Like, you're going to actually take care of us as long as I give myself in reliance to you. It is an act of radical faith that resists the enslaving nature of our world and workaholism. But here's what he says. This is really intense. Exodus 31. This is some of the hard stuff in the Bible. It says, for 6 days work is to be done. God is telling his people, for 6 days work is to be done, but on the 7th day, it is a day of Sabbath rest, holy to the Lord. It's set apart for him. It's specific for him and for you to find rest in him. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day is to be put to death. Now, I know that's incredibly challenging. I can't go into that a ton, but the point is, it's serious, right? Like, you and I don't take it seriously. Well, I'll take a break when I can. I'll take a vacation in summer. The Sabbath day is not a vacation. It's actually a rhythm of God to make sure that your spirit is close and interconnected and committed to him, that you trust him, that your faith is in practice weekly, that you're reflecting on him, that you're not just taking a rest and vacation from work. You're actually prepping your spirit to say, God, what would you have me do? Let me delight in you. Let me remember what this world is about. Let me remember who's important and what's important in this world. It is what we are needed in, or else we have spiritual death. That's what comes with it. I know I've said it, but it was so important that God put it in the 10 Commandments right after, don't worship any other gods, don't make any other graven images. It is all about our love of God. He says, honor the Sabbath by keeping it set apart. It is for you and it is for God. It's not a rule. It's not a religious exercise. It's to give you life and find true life, which is only possible through God. And we forget that instantly. You and I, it doesn't matter if you're a stay-at-home person or you work or you're just trying to pay some bills or fund your hobbies. We just have this nature to do good and do more and produce more to find meaning. And you know what? It leads to spiritual death because you know what we do. We go, oh, kids' sports, can't go to church. Oh, I got to work today, can't go to church. Oh, I got this hobby that I worked really hard for, can't go to church. I can't engage God. I don't have time to wake up and be in the Word and go to bed at night and be in the Word because, my phone, my business, my emails, like my family, like it's so busy that I'm not really listening to God, I'm not present, and I become disconnected. That is spiritual death, and you know how you'll feel it in the anxiousness of your spirit, in the brokenness of your relationships. Remember I said workaholism leads to using people and abusing people, neglecting your family, using your spouse, whatever it might be. And it's in our nature to do that. That's why God had to say this is so important, because it centers everything, the end and the beginning of your week, around God. There's a part of Scripture in Isaiah 55 that tells us the importance of trusting God that He is the delight of our souls, that He is what will bring us vitality. We think that work will, we think that money will, we think that producing a beautiful home will, we think that perfect kids will, but He says no. Just like Ecclesiastes, He goes, I've labored, I've done all this toiling, and look at what do I have to show for it? I had to give my stuff away, you lose it, and you should have nothing to show for it. You have no delight. He says you go to bed and you can't even sleep at night after all of this work. All you can do is think about it. Remember, that's what the author of Ecclesiastes said. Here's what Isaiah says. From God to His people, from God to you today. He says, come all of you who are thirsty, come to my waters and drink. He says, and you who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. He says, why spend money on what is not bread, and your labor on what does not satisfy? He says, listen to me and eat what is good, and you will delight in the richest affair. Give ear and come to me. Listen that you may live. You see what he's saying? He's like, you don't have to have money to find what is really going to fill you. You don't have to work yourself to the bone to find delight. Like the way you're going to find delight is knowing that you're hearing from God, that you're in His presence, that you're enjoying Him. He made you for it. Jesus said that man wasn't made for the Sabbath, but Sabbath was made for man. You know what He's saying? He's like, it's not made for you to serve God in the Sabbath. He actually made it for you to find life and rejuvenation in Him, to connect to the Creator who made you for a purpose, so you remember that your work doesn't define you, Pharaoh doesn't define you, your boss doesn't define you, your money doesn't define you. He says, you who have no money, come to me, and I will give you rest, and I will fill you. Come to my waters, and I will fulfill your thirst. He says, why spend your labor on that which will not satisfy you? You will not ever be satisfied. Listen, eat of my word, be in my presence, enjoy me, delight, and you will delight in the richest affair. Everything that is great about life will be found when you learn to sit and enjoy God. Here's my challenge for you today as I close. This is not something we practice. And I'm going to challenge you that God made it serious. If you have faith, it's time for you to ask, why have I not made this serious? I'm going to tell you firsthand, this is not something I practiced even as a pastor until about a year and a half ago. Our whole staff began doing it, and it changed just the depth of our relationships with God. It has had a crazy impact on my life, so I'm going to challenge you to do the same. Here's what the Sabbath is. It's a 24-hour period. It could be Friday afternoon to Saturday afternoon, whatever it is, but it's a 24-hour period to say, this is God's. You cannot touch it. The world cannot touch it. My work cannot have it. And here's the things you do. It's not that you sit there and pray all day, but that's a piece. It's that you go find something you delight in. You look around you and you go, wow, look at God's creation. It means you're stopping to enjoy what God is doing. Look what I'm grateful for in my family and my kids, because I wasn't thinking about that when I was busy. You know, it's delighting in that which is. Go do a hobby and do something that brings your soul some lift and enjoyment. And then the second part is you spend time in relationships. You say, okay, I haven't prioritized. I just get through life. We cook dinner, we do our thing, but I'm going to prioritize friendships and fellowship with other believers and my family or my spouse or whatever it is. I'm going to prioritize depth and being present, turning off, not working, not being on my phone, just me and who God has surrounded me with. And then lastly, and the most importantly, is you take time, you take a special time, not just a quick devotional on your Sabbath, but a time to really sit with God, to hear His voice, say, what do you want to show me? While you delight in His creation, you also delight in His word and say, God, fill me. It's just me and you, not for any purpose, not to get something from my work, but just to enjoy you. What do you want to say to me? It's time with God. It's time with others. It's time to enjoy and uplift and give vitality to your spirit. I'm going to challenge you to go out and consider, how can we begin practicing our Sabbath, setting aside a day. It is holy. It means set it apart. Treat it like nothing, like the most important meeting on your calendar. Nothing can touch it. I meet with God during this day. Nothing can touch it. I meet with God during this day. I enjoy God and my Creator during this day. That's my challenge to you. I love you all, and I'll see you soon.